Hi guys, this is Mr. Herbst here, and today's focus is going to be on photosynthesis. Now here's a plant. We've all seen a plant before. Plants have a remarkable ability. They can take in energy from the sun and store it in the form of food. More specifically, that form of food is called sugar, simple sugars. So they can store it for when they no longer have the sun around to make energy for them. Photosynthesis takes place in two phases. We have our light-dependent phases, and we have our light-independent phases. The light-independent reactions, well, what do you think they need? They require light. These things right here are going, this type of reaction here is going to fuel the energy needed to power the light-independent phase. Now, don't get caught up too much in that yet. Let's talk more about these light-independent reactions. The light-independent reactions do not require light. These reactions are fueled by energy from the light-dependent reactions, and they produce, this is where our glucose is formed. This is where the glucose comes from. The food that plants use comes from. Alright, so here's a plant. We have some carbon dioxide coming in from the air. We have some water coming up from the roots. It's going to enter into the leaf. We have some light coming in from the sun. And inside of that plant, we're going to have a few reactions take place. We're going to get some glucose, and we're going to get some oxygen. Here is the general equation for what photosynthesis is. This equation is very similar to what you find in chemistry. We have 6 carbon dioxide molecules coming together with 6 water molecules, which is going to make 1 glucose molecule. That is our food. And we're going to get 6 oxygen molecules out of the deal as well. What do you think affects the rate at which plants photosynthesize? That's a good question. So let's go ahead and review. We get carbon dioxide coming in from the air, reacting with water from the roots to make food and oxygen. So ultimately, what is controlling that reaction? How much light there is. So what do you think can affect the rate of photosynthesis? The intensity of the light. I'll go ahead and write here. Light intensity. How much light there is will affect the rate of photosynthesis. The more a plant can photosynthesize, the more food it makes, and the more it can grow. Back here, I have a plant, and I live in the basement. This plant here probably doesn't have a whole lot of light during the day. So that plant right there has been about the same size as the day that I bought it. It's probably not making a whole lot of food, probably not growing very fast. But something like grass, the grass that makes up your lawn, how often you got to mow it? Sometimes in the summer, twice a week. Sometimes the grass can grow really fast because it has a lot of light coming in from the sun almost the whole day. So it can make a lot of food, and thus it can grow really fast. Here's another way to think about it. We have some carbon dioxide entering the leaf from the air, mixing with some water coming in from the roots. Some reactions are going to take place in here, and we're going to get some sugars. And we are going to get some oxygen that me and you can use to breathe. Where does this amazing process occur? It occurs in an organelle that is like a little organ that's inside of the cells called a chloroplast. In the chloroplast, there are membranes that have pigments that can absorb light. What does that mean? Well, that means that we have a certain substance that can absorb certain types of light. That substance is something that you may have heard of before. That's called chlorophyll. Chlorophyll, more like borophyll, right? That's a reference to a 90s movie. But anyway, here's a picture of a chloroplast. This thing right here is really, really, really small. Really, really, really tiny. So small, in fact, your cell, a plant cell may have dozens of these things inside of every single cell. These things are really, really small. So light is going to strike this little disc-shaped thing right here called a thylakoid. A stack of thylakoids, such as we have over here, that's called a granum. Stack of thylakoids. The light-dependent reactions. So we remember we have photosynthesis occurs in two phases: light-dependent and light-independent. This is phase one. This is the light-dependent phase. I'll abbreviate that LD. Where does light-independent phase occur? That occurs in this thing right here called a stroma. That's this right there. I'll abbreviate that as LI. Here are the steps to the photosynthesis equation. There are 6 main steps. First off, light is absorbed by chlorophyll. That energy is transferred into electrons. Electrons is a complicated word, but what does it kind of sound like? It sort of sounds like the word electricity. Is that a quinky dink? No, it is definitely not. Electricity is moving electrons. So we all know that electricity in our houses can power our fridge, it can turn on our lights, and even it has to power parts of our car. Electricity is moving electrons. So those electrons can do stuff for us now. Those electrons go into the membrane of the thylakoid, and they're passed along through different proteins. That's called the electron transport chain. You can think of that sort of like dominoes. Dominoes, one falls, they all fall. Well, the electrons are transferred down through the chain. Here's another image in a different context. We have here, this right here is our cell membrane. I'll abbreviate that CM. We have some light coming in from the sun. It's going to strike a protein and release an electron. That electron is going to be passed through, dozens of other proteins, and then finally it's going to end, and it's going to be picked up by this thing called NADP. NADP is going to absorb whatever energy was left through that whole electron transport chain. In that electron transport chain, we have the ability to do work. So at each step along the line where that electron is passed through, we lose a little bit of the energy. At the end of the line, there's still a little bit of energy left. So we have this substance called NADP that grabs up the rest of the energy so that we can use it later on. Plants can use it later on. Here's a picture of what's going on with photosynthesis. We have some water that comes in from the roots. That enters the leaf. We have some carbon dioxide that comes in from the air that enters the leaf. We have some light that comes in and enters the leaf. The light is going to strike chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is going to have it's going to start a whole chain of different reactions, and eventually we're going to end up with some oxygen and end up with some sugar. Now that sugar is in a very simple form. Simple sugar is not a very good way to store energy long term. So what does a plant do? A plant stores its food as starch. At least some plants do. Starch, what is starch? An example of starch is something like a potato. A potato, where do the potatoes come from? They come from the ground. A potato is a storage unit of glucose. It is a storage unit of sugar. Starch is a long chain of sugar molecules, and the plant can use that to survive those really long winters where there isn't very much sun. Here's another picture, a little bit more complicated this time. We have some light, which is going to strike the thylakoid membranes that are inside of our chloroplast. We're going to have some water coming in from the roots, and that light in the thylakoid membrane has the ability to separate water. So we're going to separate this molecule right here, water. And that, believe it or not, that's actually really hard to do. Us human beings can do that, but pretty much only in a lab. We can't do that in our bodies. We need special equipment to do that. It's a pretty tough thing to break apart water. Water is really stable. But once water is broken apart, we're going to get some oxygen that is going to go off into the atmosphere. Those hydrogen ions have the ability to release energy. That energy is going to be in the form of ATP. So ultimately, the light striking the thylakoid membrane is going to release a little bit of ATP, which a cell can use for energy. And then here's that molecule again, NADP. Those two things are going to go off to power what's called the Calvin cycle. The Calvin cycle is going to need a little bit of carbon dioxide from the air and it's going to be, there's a series of reactions, and eventually our end product is going to be sugar from the Calvin cycle. Now, we after the Calvin cycle is over, we have ADP now. It's like in my last video I talked about ADP. That's that uncharged battery. So ATP is going to give up its phosphate and supply energy for the Calvin cycle. Then we're going to be left with some ADP, and then we're going to be left with an uncharged molecule of NADP. Those two molecules are going to go off to be reused again in the light-dependent reactions. So everything that is on the left of this line that I'm drawing, everything on the left of this line here is light-dependent reactions. I'll abbreviate that LD. Everything on the right of this line here, these are the light-independent reactions. This is the Calvin cycle. The Calvin cycle produces our sugar. Light-independent reactions produce sugar. Light-dependent reactions is where we get a molecule of ATP to power the light-independent reactions. Again, this concludes photosynthesis. This was Mr. Herbst, and I'm signing off, folks. Y'all have a nice day.